Assalamu alaikum everyone, my name is Ihsan, and today we will be continuing on our topic of the discussion. We've been talking about societal well-being, which is a roadmap to self-purification at the community level. This lecture series has been going on since 18th of Ramadan, and it's been brought to you by Babul Bari Hashim Society of Mississauga, Ontario. And I'm very honored to be here talking to you in the last 10 days of Ramadan on this very important topic for sure. Yesterday, we were talking about Luqman's advice to his sons, and we talked about it because we were actually discussing the relationship between parents and children, how parents have responsibilities toward their children. As we already know, it's a two-way relationship. Obviously, children have lots of responsibilities towards their parents, but parents also have duties towards their children, and we discussed how they're responsible to make sure that they provide adequate training and that is moral and religious, and they arrange for food and shelter, but also for their education, both worldly and religious. We also talked about how the responsibility basically starts from giving their child a good name, right? It begins from there and continues on. And so it's definitely like a hard job. And um, that's why we were looking at some of the things that these great personalities did. And we specifically talked about Luqman because it is one of the great personalities that is actually mentioned in the Holy Quran. There is an entire surah which is actually named after him. So it's Surah Luqman. And we saw like a lot of verses from there where he was explaining to his sons and he was talking to his son, he was advising his sons how should they lead their life in this world, how should they establish salat, how should they practice amr bil ma'ruf wa nahi anil munkar, how he advised them about tawheed and how he advised about him for about being respectful to their parents. So all those things we discussed yesterday, and today we are obviously, since we are on this topic, I'm going to continue on, but we also wanted to know what our Ahlul Bayt and our Holy Prophet actually said about these things. We examined a lot of stories and narrations when we were talking about this two-way relation between parents and children. We discussed how the Holy Prophet always recommended and encouraged to show affection towards children, how he actually talked about, how he actually made sure or made it a point that he was taking care of the feelings of even an infant baby. So like when parents would actually bring their infant child to Rasulullah for blessings, he would take them in his lap, and then he would try to make sure that the infant baby was comfortable. And if he would wet his clothes, the parents would get worried, but the Holy Prophet would actually say, don't be harsh to them or don't be too quick to remove the child. It's totally fine. And after this would be over, Rasulullah would actually, after the parents would leave with their children, he would then wash his clothes and purify it. So basically, the lesson to draw from here was that the Holy Prophet actually recognized that the feelings of even an infant baby was actually superior or outweighed the purity of his clothes. So lots of stories like that there as well. We talked about how the Holy Prophet also made sure that he, showed affection to his grandsons, so Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein. So all those things were discussed in that chapter, and we're going to continue on that discussion. And today we're going to talk about our first Imam, Imam Ali alayhi salam. What was his advice to his sons? So what lessons can we draw from there? So we'll try to recap Imam Ali's family tree, the importance of Najul Balagha. Lots of letters and sermons and his sayings and his quotes are actually collected and compiled in the form of a book by Al-Razi. We'll talk about that as well. And it's known, the book's title is Najul Balagha, which literally means peak of eloquence, right? So we will talk about that as well. And then finally, we'll discuss what are those important lessons, what are those important pieces of advice that he gave to his son, that Imam Ali gave to his son. Um, so without further ado, let's start with that. So as we all know, Imam Ali was actually the cousin of our Holy Prophet, and he was there with him from day one. As soon as um, he was always there for his support. Um, he was a great personality. He always helped Rasulullah. Um, so he also became his son-in-law when obviously he married the Holy Prophet's daughter, so Lady Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayh. They had 4 children: Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein, Bibi Zainab, and Lady Kulsum, Lady Sayyida Kulsum. So obviously, Imam Ali is known for his knowledge. The wealth of his knowledge is obviously second to none. He was also appointed as a wasi by Rasulullah, and we also remember that he was also assigned as his brother when the migration was done from Makkah to Medina. So that's just a quick recap. I'm sure pretty much everyone here is aware of Imam Ali's background. So I'm just going to jump into Nahj al-Balagha, the book, the title of the book that basically contains all the letters and sermons of Imam Ali. As I said, he was a man of great knowledge. A lot of people benefited from his knowledge. And even Rasulullah used to say, I am the city of knowledge and Ali is its gate, right? It's a very popular narration, very popular hadith. So what does it really mean? It means that through Imam Ali is that we can get access to the knowledge of Rasulullah. So imagine such a big honor was there for Imam Ali. Obviously, Imam Ali would give speeches at different places and different situations. He used to write letters, for example, to his children, his governors, commanders of his army, and even to those politically opposing him. Right? He would write those letters. He was very famous for his wise and short sayings. You might have seen them a lot as well, and we've come across these speeches and letters and sayings have been put together in this book, which is Nahj al-Balagha, and it's by a famous scholar, Sayyid Sharif al-Razi, right? And it's known as Nahj al-Balagha. The name is amazing too, right? The peak of eloquence. It's because it is a brilliant, brilliant demonstration of the powerful and eloquent speech and writing that is in there, right? It's a great collection. Imam's words would have had a tremendous effect on people, whosoever would hear it. And they continue to have, as you can see, those white short sayings are very, very profound and definitely brings about a great impact whenever we hear them or listen to them, right? So imagine he said it such a long time ago, and yet the impact is still as great as ever. Now, Imam Ali delivered all these sermons with such great eloquence. The language, the context, the meaning, the semantics, they were perfect masterpieces, right? And he did this without any preparation or notes. He would just go and on the spur of the moment he'd do it. And that's why the people at that time valued his knowledge as well. And they used to memorize his sermons. So that was a little sidebar, but it speaks volumes about the perfection of his sermons and sayings. Now, although these letters and sermons and his sayings were done many years ago, they're still very, very well, and that's precisely the reason why they're so impactful. And we can actually classify this book, because it contains that collection, we can actually classify this book into different topics, such as like religious and scientific concepts, right? They're still relevant, they're unique in description. there is a fascinating explanation of the beginning of creation. A lot of people actually look for that answer, right? This question, like an existential question, is there? How did we come into being? What was the source of creation? That account is there. Then we have an amazing account of different types of creatures. So very scientific uh, knowledge is actually buried in there. Another category is of social topics, such as social justice. It's a very important and debated topic these days as well. A lot of content is actually on that. Leadership, and then role and responsibilities of leaders, of scholars, and the common people. All that can be classified into one category as well, that has been discussed in detail in the book. The topic somewhat, and then there is this topic of self-purification or individual growth. We obviously are talking about self-purification, we're talking about at the societal level, but this book also actually talks about that individual growth, that individual spirituality, that self-purification. It talks about, different forms of worship, akhlaq, attitude towards dunya, or this the worldly perspective, and the reflection of akhirah, the day of judgment, the remembrance of akhirah, right? All those topics also are discussed in this book. And then there is obviously a religious touch to it as well. There are religious topics, and it talks about the significance of certain rituals that are there, the importance of the book, which is the Quran, and obviously the position of the Ahlul Bayt, how they are role models in different aspects of life. So a little bit about the author, or I should say the person who actually combined all this into a book. Sayyid al-Razi, obviously, is his name. He was born in Baghdad and came from a lineage of Rasulullah. So he was a very knowledgeable man, or very interested, passionate about the writings and teachings of Imam Ali. And he actually did a lot of hard work to actually compile this book, traveled great distances to collect the words of Imam Ali. And then he put them all together. Even though he had health issues, he had a very poor health, he spent long hours each day to make sure that he was actually able to find content and then compile it in the form of a book. Let me just give you some short sayings of Imam Ali from this book. For example, one is, the sin that makes you sad and repentant is liked by Allah more than the good deed that makes you vain. So very short saying, and yet so deep and profound, tells you so much about what your intention should be like, how you should plan your activities, how doing a good deed that's going to make you proud is not beneficial to you. But if you do a sin that's going to make you realize that you have actually sinned and then make you repent, that is actually better in the eyes of Allah. And then another short saying is, a wise person thinks before he speaks, whereas a fool speaks before he thinks. Again, the importance of making sure that you're really, really careful when you're speaking, right? It's not like just speak anything that you like or before thinking, but make sure that you are really, if you're saying something, it's useful, it's truthful, and it's really important for you to say that out loud. If it doesn't serve any purpose, if it's aimless, and if it's inaccurate, and if it's harmful, then you shouldn't really speak. Another quote, and we'll probably wrap up this portion of our topic today. The real act of forgiveness is to forgive while having power to punish. So again, it talks about the courage. Courage is something, or forgiveness in this case, is something that you do when you still, because anyone who's not able to overcome their opponent will say, "Oh, I forgive you." That's probably easy, but like if you're not able to if you're able to forgive someone, even though you had the power to punish someone, that is something that speaks volumes of your character, right? So obviously, when we read these sayings, these are extremely impactful. We should also try that we can actually act on these things. Like think about like what you have done. For example, now you've heard about these things. Think about what you have done in the past few days. Write down some of the actions maybe that you have done that have pleased Allah, and a few actions that you may have done that have displeased Him. Right. So maybe repeat this exercise and then try to reconcile them with the things we just discussed, and you can actually think about, you can actually evaluate yourself. And this is that path, this is that roadmap of self-verification. You're trying to understand and then analyze your behavior and your conduct. And not just that, obviously that's the first step, but once you've done that, you're trying to make sure that you can actually improve and better yourself. Now, I think the final, so we've talked about the background of family, we've talked about his knowledge, and we have also talked about this book that contains this beautiful collection. Now, the final section of today's session is really, which is really key, which is really also the main topic, is what were the pieces of advice that Imam Ali gave to his sons, right? It's still linked to our main topic, which is the relationship between parents and children, and how they have a major responsibility toward their children. Parents have a major responsibility towards their children to make sure that they provide some of these things that we discussed, like moral, religious, and worldly education, to name a few. Right? Now, our parents obviously know what is best for us. They'll give us advice that can help us become better, and that can help us build our character. Imam Ali is the most knowledgeable person after Rasul, after the Holy Prophet is the most knowledgeable person, and he also advised his sons. This advice has actually been recorded in this book as well, Nahjul Balagha, and it's in the form of a letter. This letter was obviously beneficial for his sons and contains plenty of advice for us. And this is one of the main reasons that we want to really see what he talks about it. And I'm going to go over like a few bits and pieces, because it's a letter. I'm just going to try to extract some gems of advice there from the Imam, and hopefully we can learn something from him. So what is the first thing that he said? Like he said, my first and foremost advice to you, my son, is to be conscious of Allah. Right? Again, we talked about how Luqman advises sons about Tawheed, and this is how Imam Ali is actually starting his advice, saying, okay, be conscious of Allah, be wary of His presence, right? And there could be so much said, about just this one line, right? What does it mean to be conscious of Allah? What does it mean to think that Allah is always present or omnipresent, or whatever you do, He's there. So make sure your actions, your behavior, you're always at your best behavior. All those things, like just being mindful that about the presence of Allah should be enough for you to become an extremely pious and extremely pious person. And that's the first advice. Now he continues on and says, be His obedient servant and keep His thought always fresh in your mind. So again, like part of the same theme, he's talking about our relationship, or his son's relationship with Allah. He's saying, okay, you're now conscious of Allah, but make sure that whatever He says, whatever His commandments are, you're actually obeying them. You're submitting your will to Him, and just make sure that you're always aware that if you do not fulfill your duties towards Him, He's there, and He's watching you constantly. Whatever you say in public or in secret, He's aware. Whatever you do, whatever sort of action you're doing, He is aware of it. So obviously, only Imam is advising this in his letter to his son. He's actually indirectly advising us all as well, right? It's it's really important for all of us to fear Allah and to always think about it. Our duty towards Allah is to obey His commands, make sure we're doing actions which would actually please Him, and stay away from those actions that would displease Him. So again, as we talk about that we should think before we speak, we should also consider any action that we do, anything that we do, we should consider whether it will please or displease Allah, whether it will take me closer to Allah or whether it would take me away from Allah. So always try this exercise. Number two, let's say another advice that you can take from this letter is, he said, try your best to keep away from those who indulge in vices and sins. So very short and sweet lesson tells us to how it's really important to know what your company is and to actually control what your company is. If you are with those people who are actually indulging themselves in behaviors that would displease Allah or make you distant from Allah, absolutely stay away from them. Surround yourself with good people, because we actually tend to copy what our friends do. We tend to find interest in those things where our people around us would go. So a very important piece of advice again by Imam Ali. Another thing that he mentioned is, and I'm gonna read the translation, develop the habit of patience in situations of sufferings, calamities, and adversities. This virtue of patience is one of the highest values of morality and nobility of character, and it is the best habit which one can develop. So obviously, we have heard a lot about patience. It's a great virtue. It's one of the highest values of morality. If something is bad is happening to you, and you're having a difficult time, you're going through a hardship, you shouldn't complain. You shouldn't say, "Oh, why me?" Or you didn't say, "Oh, like, why did you have to deal with it?" It's a situation. Try and work out a way to solve the problem, but above all, also try to be patient. That's the way to deal with it. If it's, for example, let's take an example. If it's too hot, if the weather is too hot, being patient would mean you're not complaining about the weather all the time, right? Let's say if you're stuck in weather, then instead of whining, maybe, try to do something, maybe listen to Quran, reflect Allah's blessings. So all those things, change your perspective, and you will obviously get a double reward of being patient as well, listening to words of Allah. But these are some of the ways how you can actually deal with situations like this, because everyone is going to face this situation. There's no one in this world who has not faced hardship. It will come to you. It's very handy. It's very important to realize how your approach should be towards a situation like that. Maybe one more gem of advice that you can actually take, and I'm going to translate. Again, this is all mentioned in his letters to his son. He's advising his son on some of the important things that he believes should be passed on to his children. So obviously we are taking and we're trying to draw lessons for us as well. So he says, do unto others as you wish others to do to you. Whatever you like for yourself, like for others. Whatever you dislike to happen to you, spare others from such happening. So again, such a good rule is out there. Like, he gives us a principle in the simplest way possible. He says, like, so for example, someone is mean to you and he's saying bad things to you, it's very easy to actually do the same thing to that person, to avenge that person. But after reading this principle of Imam Ali, if you're a true follower of Imam Ali, you shouldn't be treating back that person in the same way. You should instead be polite, be kind, be gentle. And obviously this requires a lot of practice. This requires a lot of patience and a lot of courage, I would say, as well, right? But just remember that your behavior shouldn't reflect what others are, like how others are treating you. It should reflect what Imam Ali or what the teachings of Islam is telling us to do, or what you would like others to do to you, right? So that should be the principle, not the so other people's behavior should not drive you. They should not dictate how you should be acting or how your behavior should look like with others. So you can see like these were some of the important um, things that we wanted to draw lessons from. They are very specifically related to the advice that we've been talking about from the parents to their children. One thing that I should mention about Nahj al-Balagha, obviously this letter is actually Nahj al-Balagha, Peak of Eloquence. Many non-Muslims actually also read that book. Many academics have read the books and they've been amazed really by the words of Imam Ali. Again, there's such a great wealth and depth to the knowledge that we have here that's actually has been impressing many academics to this day, even though it was written like hundreds, like years ago, and yet we still find it relevant and effective and impactful. So again, I'm going to pause this here. I'm going to conclude this here. We talked about how Imam Ali is a really knowledgeable person, was a cousin of Rasulullah, so he had strong link with the family of the Holy Prophet, obviously. And then we talked about Nahj al-Balagha, which contains its compilation of sermons and letters and his sayings. Again, the book was actually compiled by Al-Razi, Sayyid Al-Razi. He's from the lineage of the Holy Prophet, and he was a great scholar. And he did a lot of hard work in actually making sure about the authenticity and about compiling all of the content of Imam Ali. He was truly passionate about researching and about the letters and sermons that Imam Ali had delivered. And like I said, Imam Ali wisdom is full of inspiration to this day. Like, right? It's really timeless. And if we go and take a look at the book as well, it talks about a variety of subjects, from creation and from the purpose of creation, from akhlaq to Quran to religious topics to Ahlul Bayt and so on and so forth. And obviously, and at the end, we talked about this letter in Nahj al-Balagha, which is by the Imam to his sons, and he's giving them the advice. And we talked about how some of the, or actually all of the advice was actually indirectly for us as well to learn from. So with that, I will end today's session. Thank you so much for joining. Like I said, I am really honored to be on this podium to deliver such series. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. And thank you so much for your participation and for listening and watching to these video series. Allah Hafiz.